which is item number 61, IFC. Also pulled by Councilmember Flanagan. The author want to make a motion?
I'd like to move approval of 61, please.
There's a motion to approve 61. Is there a second to that motion? Item number 61. Councilmember Poole seconds. Councilmember Alter, you can open up, and then we'll go to Mr. Flanagan for his amendment discussion.
Sure. I'm going to open up, and then maybe after Mr. Flanagan makes his amendment, I can speak to it. I wasn't able to. We were working on some elements to make sure we observed the CARES Act with staff and wasn't able to post it till late. And so I want to clarify, make sure we're understanding what we're doing, but I'll let him make his motion on that. The idea with item 61 is to create Austin Civilian Conservation Corps. You can think of it as the Civilian Conservation Corps 2.0. It harkens back to the 1930s with Roosevelt and a very successful program that we know works, that put people to work, gave them hope, gave them training, and left a lasting legacy for our country. We see it with the trees that we see all over the place, and with trails and lots of things that we enjoy as a country and here in Austin. What we're trying to do with the Civilian Conservation Corps is firstly put Austinites who've lost their jobs back to work, and with support from the federal government. We're also going to be giving those Austinites new skills that they can use for future employment. And we're going to do it in a way that makes Austin more beautiful and safer along the way by putting them to work on a lot of things that they can do safely with the distancing requirements, like wildfire mitigation or planting trees, building trails and stuff like that. I'm really excited about this as an opportunity. We know this type of project works. We have organizations in our community that are already operating on this, and we have an opportunity here to really build and adapt it for today rather than the 1930s, and to turn this crisis into an opportunity for job creation, skill development, and the improvement of our city. If Mr. Flanagan wants to make his motion, then I can kind of speak to process stuff, but or I can do it before.
Okay. Councilmember Flanagan, you pulled this item.
Is there a main motion? Did I miss that part?
There was a motion, and maybe it was moved and seconded.
Okay, thanks. I have an amendment that staff sent out about 2:45 this afternoon. I think it was sent to everybody's staff. I had to get my staff to send my own amendment to me. So it may not be in your own inbox, but your staff should have it. But it's one slight change, the bottom of page 2, where it's the very first be it resolved. And it is just changing the phrase create to explore the creation of an Austin Civilian Conservation Corps, and then adding the phrase or the expansion of similar existing community programs. That's my amendment, Mayor. With a second, I'll explain.
Been an amendment made. Second to that is Councilmember Harper Madison. Mr. Flanagan, you have the floor.
Thank you. So I really support the concept of this, and I thank Councilmember Alter for bringing this to the dais today. But I think the conversation that we heard during public comment this morning was really valuable, and I want to make sure that as the manager and the staff explore this concept, that we're not precluding the ability of this to be accomplished through existing programs like YouthWorks, where there is already significant infrastructure and process and capabilities, rather than leaving the main option to be a staff-driven program. So that's ultimately the only thing my amendment does.
So Mayor, if I can.
Yeah, so you can address it, and then we'll go to other members.
Sure. So I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I want to explain some parts of this, as happens sometimes when we do things on the dais in terms of what we're allowed to do in providing our direction. We have to do it as appropriate for our role as policymakers. As I see what we have fashioned, we have said, do this, and then go figure out how to do it best. And the guidance that we provided in the program structure highly recommends relying on existing organizations to get it done. And that is exactly how we also had some of the conversations on item 23. And just as we had conversations that we couldn't do it the same for the small businesses as for the nonprofits, as for childcare, I think the same thing happens in this particular case. I am completely fine if staff goes out and they say that we should completely rely on one organization, then that is the way we would do it. And I think that this framework allows that for that. By saying explore the creation, you're not saying do. And I think that we need to be putting people into employment. We do not have every piece of the structure created because we have high aspirations for this program. There is an opportunity to pull down a lot of potential federal funds. There are movement to advocate for a civilian conservation corps on the national level. There are parts of platforms that have green jobs, and all of this would position us to be bringing that down. So we also need a flexible structure. And I believe that what I have actually addresses the concern, and I've been working very closely with American Youth Works, and I think that the communication did not reflect the conversations and the way that we have structured it, just because of a navigating of what we need to do as council in resolutions.
Okay, so I need some help here, because I'm not seeing the substantive difference. I understand Mr. Flanagan wanted me making sure that it doesn't have to be something new. It could be the expansion or support of similarly existing community programs. My understanding from Councilmember Alter is that she believes that to be already included in, but doesn't want to say we want them to explore. We say we want them to actually do something. Is the sweet spot here to say the city manager is directed to create an Austin Civilian Conservation Corps, which could be the expansion or support of similar existing communities, which could be, without limitation, the expansion or support of similar existing community programs?
So Mayor, I think that is what it does in the program structure. If you put it where you have it, I have two challenges with it. One, it kind of breaks up the flow of what we're trying to do. So I would rather, I'd sort of rather place it slightly differently. The other thing is that we had to be very careful in constructing this so that we were in line with the CARES program, which doesn't allow us to spend money on existing programs that we would be funding otherwise. And so it is different to say we're going to deploy an existing organization to do this work than it is that we are going to expand an existing program. It's just a semantic, but we had to work through lots of steps with this. And so we took a lot of care in shaping lots of language to be mindful that we would accomplish our goal and still meet the requirements. And I'm concerned with that phrasing, that it crosses some of the lines that were raised to me at various points that we tried to avoid with respect to using CARES Act for portions of this.
And my preference on this one, I'd like to get this going because to me, this is all about COVID response. And I think it's really important that we put people to work as quickly as we can that are out of work. But to me, this is a COVID response measure. As long as we're doing COVID response stuff, I'm fine doing it in ways that add community benefit. We should be doing that everywhere, regardless of what we're doing, and we need to make sure we comply. But I'm thinking that the language that says that the city manager is directed to create an Austin Civilian Corps, which could include the expansion and support of similarly existing third-party community programs, and add the word third party, right then address the issue that you were trying to address. We could ask Bree whether that addressed that issue. I recognize the kind of the form issue that you're raising, but we run into both ways. The objection is just leaving create by itself without saying that creation
What if
could
we-
be other things.
What if we were to say the city manager is directed to create an Austin Civilian Conservation Corps to employ Austinites who've been economically impacted by compliance with COVID-related public health measures to complete conservation and other beneficial projects, or expand to do it?
Yeah,
Something
or
like
which
that,
could
or
be.
put it under program structure in the first place.
Okay, Councilmember Flanagan, if we take your amendment and move it to the end of that sentence, is that to say which could include the expansion or support of similarly existing third-party community programs? Does that get to what you wanted to do?
I mean, I think it does because we're really dancing around semantics, and I think we all are generally trying to say the same thing. So that would satisfy it. I do think it's important to make it clear that this is on the list of things that is a way to comply with this direction.
And again, this is, I think, semantics, because that's how we, I can't tell them, go give it to this organization. So we have to, approach this appropriately for the policy role. And we have been trying to do that, which was a challenge we faced elsewhere. Mayor, do you want to read the last part? Because I think that was a little bit better.
It would say, your
Just
language,
expand.
city manager is directed to create.
Can you just, for the record, please say where you are in the document?
I am in the be it resolved clause at the page, bottom of page 2 of 9, the first be it resolved clause. It's the area where Councilmember Flanagan had offered his amendment. And that be it resolved clause says the city manager is directed to, and this is where Mr. Flanagan's initial amendment was, but what I heard, and I think we might have a meeting of minds, is the city manager is directed to create an Austin Civilian Conservation Corps to employ Austinites who've been economically impacted by compliance with COVID-related public health measures, complete conservation and beneficial projects. So it's the same paragraph as it was initially, but then it would add the language, which could be or include the expansion or support of similar existing third-party community programs.
Councilmember Kitchen.
Mayor,
Yes.
I wonder,
Councilmember Tovo.
yeah, to me, this is really a piece of information that belongs in the program structure and not in the mission statement. And so I would prefer that we keep the mission statement very clear as the lead sponsor has laid it out. To me, I read the various places within it, including, I don't have the last version lines correctly, but there are, lines throughout program structure that speak to collaboration or to the utilization of existing contracts to make this work happen. But my preference would be to take the line that you all are crafting and put it at the end of the program structure. So after the last bullet, say, this could be accomplished through, this could also be accomplished through, and then pick up on your language as you had it. So that would be my preference. I don't know how you, Councilmember Alter, feel about that solution.
Jamie, I think we're going back to you. I think that staff's taking this by way of kind of their direction when they go back. It's less important to me where it is as long as it is in there. So the question for you is, does it meet your purpose if at the end of the program structure section, the language says that this could be accomplished with the inclusion or expansion. No, this could be accomplished with the expansion or this could be accomplished with the inclusion or expansion or support of third-party community projects.
Mayor, I would just say that I prefer it in the program structure, but I will point out that the second bullet says take advantage of existing local organizations, capacity to administer workforce programs and or deploy Austinites in conservation projects.
And I think it's
And
close.
the latter part is that I'm happy with your language. I would much prefer it in the program structure section.
So Jimmy, I think the question is at the end of the project structure section. So long as it's in there, is that an acceptable placement? This could be
I think- I think it's fine. I think staff gets the point.
Okay. Is there an objection to including that language at the end of the project inclusion section? Project structure section? Language and would say this could be accomplished with the inclusion, expansion, or support of third-party community projects. All right, without objection, that then is added to that section. Further discussion on this item. Councilmember Kitchen.
Well, let me just say thank you to Councilmember Alter for bringing this and to your co-sponsors. I think it's a very interesting and timely idea. I have a question about the interpretation of it, and I'm just going to state what my interpretation would be and see if you agree. When we talk about who can be employed under this, so be including our homeless population, as they have been impacted by COVID-19 also. And as you know, we have a program right now, and again, I'm not suggesting that any particular program needs to be expanded. I'm just reminding people that we have a program through the Other Ones Foundation that helps employ homeless individuals. And so when I read this language about people being impacted, I read it to be broad enough to not exclude people who are experiencing homelessness. And so I just wanted to confirm that that is the intent so that our staff doesn't later have some question about that.
Absolutely. It does include homeless people. The focus on funding that would come from CARES. At this point, the current interpretation is not on public land, but the Other Ones Foundation was absolutely one of the programs here in town that we were modeling on. And the reality is that we have multiple organizations in town that can train people. We have an opportunity to potentially partner with other levels of government to bring down more funding or combine funding, as well as with our workforce board, to be able to really create a program or a consortium that allows us to deploy folks in green jobs. And again, there is a possibility of in 2021 there being more funding that goes into those kinds of things, and having the infrastructure built and the systems and knowing how to get all that down is of an advantage. But certainly the Other Ones Foundation could be part of that discussion. You'd want to make sure, part of choosing, it can't just be any organization that comes up and says they want to do it, because we want to have organizations that are able to provide the training and the workforce and work with their particular population. But homeless that are impacted by COVID would certainly be a potential population that could be served.
I don't mean to suggest that the Other Ones Foundation is the only place that a homeless individual could be hired through.
Sure.
I was just giving that as an example. And so, City Manager, I would want to make sure that we interpret this language as to include homeless individuals, because they have certainly been impacted by the COVID-19. So thank you, Councilmember Alter.
Councilmember Poole.
Thanks. And this effort, this initiative that Councilmember Alter is bringing today is really wonderful. It has its roots and is an echo of the Great Depression program, one of the New Deal suite that FDR brought back in the early 30s after his first election. And I've always looked to the work of both Roosevelts, FDR and Theodore, of course, John Kennedy, and then LBJ is kind of my North Stars for progressive social legislation and watershed changes to what was America, and how we've changed over the last 100 years. And it's really timely, I think, for us to bring a civilian conservation corps type effort here to Austin. We're the right city to model after what was done at that made a large impact on our community, almost 100 years ago. So thank you, Councilmember Alter. I really, really like this initiative. Thanks so much.
Okay. Any further discussion before we take a vote? Mayor Pro Tem.
I like the idea of this. I'll be honest, my initial reaction was, I don't know what the word is, but you were creating these hard labor jobs, and what seemed to be. The one example I see is maybe beautification and art could be, I don't know what that is, but I get the comparison to FDR. I guess I'd have to argue there was a incredibly different work ethic for people in that time. And so I'm curious to know exactly, it'll be interesting to know the appetite of folks who apply for what look like incredibly hard labor type of jobs. And so I am supportive with explaining that caveat part of it, because obviously jobs are good. I guess I would ask to make sure that if in fact we partner with a nonprofit, there could I did see something about, I'm trying to find it, about creating training opportunities. And I guess I would want to make sure we could provide some digital training of some sort to people. So maybe they work and do green raking or whatever it is, and then they have the opportunity to, continue to get access to more, I guess, tech. And this work is honorable work, absolutely. But the idea of us creating this core this core of jobs just is I don't know why I had this weird feeling about that. There's a part that says should pay a living wage. I would actually shall pay a living wage, and that it be the cities shall pay the cities, because living wage is defined differently by so if it's shall pay the cities living wage, and then that same I'll find it. Funding. I would prefer to say shall pay a living wage, and it'd be specific to the city's living wage. And I would also prefer it says should provide like additional training, that they shall provide some kind of additional training for folks that apply for this job. Can we change those shoulds to shall?
I'm happy to change it on the training. There were lots of nuances on the living wages because we have existing contracts and we have programs that work with AmeriCorps and they get their housing and other stuff that there's, I just don't want it to preclude something that we worked hard to get that language for, so that the existing programs would be able to operate with their models that provide various trainings and other things. The intention is there, but I'm not sure that just changing it on the dais will address their concerns. The intention is for them to pay the living wage, but if we have some of the existing contracts that we have are with American Youth Works, and they have a AmeriCorps set up. And so it doesn't work exactly the same. And so the intention is exactly what you say. I just there's some nuances there that I don't want to create problems that I'm just not able to address. So if we could, they're certainly supposed to be doing training, and I will add back on your earlier comment that, you know, there are options for disaster training and other kinds of things. And the type of training they would get would depend on the organization and depend on the scope of projects that are developed, and could be a varying set of skills that can be used in lots of different trades and other things. And we did originally have in there some work about green jobs with the building sector and weatherization and other things, but we're asked to not put those in there at this time because of concerns about competing with existing businesses that are doing that work. Whereas most of these other things, the goal of this is the workforce development, but for this program, those jobs would not be done.
Okay, so I'm a little concerned about us passing something where they're not required to pay the city's living wage. And I understand what you're saying, because in fact, I remember we got an intern from an outside organization in my office, and and when we asked what they were paying her like $13 an hour, and I said no, that at a minimum it should be the city's. And they said, sorry, you know, we have specific funding. And then I said, well, then let me subsidize the extra $2 an hour so this person can get at least a living, you know, the city's living wage. So I'm just uncomfortable if we're creating jobs and they're not getting paid at least. Because we have this discussion about the folks that work in our city hall and how we control that. So I don't know if I just should make an amendment to add that change if it's not considered friendly.
It's not that I don't consider it friendly. I just don't want to create unintended consequences. The intention is to pay living wage. There were certain situations that we needed to accommodate. And I don't know, for instance, if the other one's foundation home folks are getting a living wage or they're getting all these other supports. I don't know how that's structured. And so you may, by making that, preclude the models that they have from working. And I just, you know, the intention is to pay the living wage, but there are some nuances here that I'm just a little.
Mayor Pro Tem, does it work? Staff's going to have to come back
That's
to
why
us.
we said should, but.
Staff's going to have to come back to us with how they would actually do this.
Okay.
What if we put in there something that said that if they were proposing anything that would result in anybody being paid less than a living wage, they have to flag it when this comes back to us, so that we could then have the conversation about why it was they were proposing it. I think we all agree that that's not something that we would want, that it would take some special set of circumstances. I don't want them not to be able to include that. But if it comes back to us and they recognize that it has to be red flagged, that would, I think, provide us the opportunity to say, oh, it's not justified in that instance. And I don't think staff is going to propose it at all, or certainly in an instance where it's not going to get past us. I wonder if that's a way to give them the whiteboard, but express that concern.
Yeah, there's some programs also give childcare subsidies, and so it's just complicated to change on the dais. But
Mayor,
Yes, Councilor Poole.
I'm familiar with AmeriCorps programs, and they do substitute cash money for an allotment for housing, and I think there are some programs that give you like free childcare, for example. So in the end, there's value to those, like the housing piece. You're not paying for the housing that's provided, and so that would be why they wouldn't be offering a $15 an hour minimum livable wage. Just hold that, I mean, I think we understand that, hold that concept in mind, because we don't want to keep, for example, a group like AmeriCorps out, because they do really good work, if they are not paying $15 an hour because they have the value of the housing and possibly even the food for the folks who are staying at their site.
And that just feels really weird. People working for housing and food. It reminds me of something really, really bad a long time ago. So,
I had a job like that when I was in college in summertime. I was a waitress. I got hardly any money, but I had a place to stay and they fed me. I mean, it was the thing that was the program.
They also give education scholarships and pay for school and stuff. There's a national program with AmeriCorps and all of that. I completely understand your sentiment. They will be coming back to us with the program. I think there's every intention to do that. It's just there are some nuances here that I don't feel like I have enough information to absolutely require it. And to me, should as a strong statement.
okay, and maybe I'm just
It
thinking
says
about
shall.
this.
I mean, I think it says shall. Let me just see. I think it does say shall and those other things. So if it's shall pay a living wage and those other things, we probably are covered. And let me see.
Councilmember Tovo, did you have a way out of the box?
I'll let it.
I mean, not yet. I would just say, as a
I think it's
co-sponsor.
a good sentiment, Mayor Pro Tem. I think it's good sentiment. Just how do we reflect it?
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that should be the standard. I also support providing a way for programs like AmeriCorps to participate. So I don't have a way out of this dilemma at the moment, but maybe we could just take a couple minutes and all look at the resolution and see whether there's a way to just enhance what I know is Councilmember Alter's intent of reflecting that
I think it says already
that we've all
accepting-
supported.
Councilmember
I
Alter?
think it says accepting. It already says accepting those who are currently participating in existing city contracts or a federally funded workforce development program. So we probably could just change it to shall in that case. That was why I was trying to figure out on the fly was harder. But I think if we say the Austin Civilian Conservation Corps shall pay a living wage to all participants, accepting those who are currently participating in existing city contracts or a federally funded workforce development program, we're probably okay with the scenarios we needed, which was the intention all along. We just used the word should instead of shall. But I would like
Anybody objection to making that shall? Hearing none, we'll make that shall. Manager, my request would be that if staff finds something that didn't fit within that exception, that makes sense, that you present that back to council as well. If there's something that makes sense for us to do, I don't want us to not be able to take advantage of something that we would all agree to because it just didn't fit those words. But I'm comfortable with those words staying exactly the way they are because none of us want to see people working for less than a living wage.
Thanks, Mayor. And I just want to take this moment to emphasize something that had been echoed by the council members in various forums of that this is the first step of that direction should this pass, and then we will be coming back because we're going to be having another conversation about funding both next council cycle for COVID funding overall, but then obviously as we look at to our current budgeted expenses. So that'll be a future conversation. There may be opportunities to pilot or to prototype in the interim, but just to manage expectations. But that's the intention of my understanding of this resolution as written.
Okay. We're ready to take a vote. Councilmember Tovo?
I just wanted to say something quick, and then I think Councilmember Alter had said she had closing comments. I just wanted to say how excited I am to see this resolution move forward. Councilmember Alter, I think this is an extremely innovative and creative way of building on this historical example to really make it a relevant response, not just to our current situation, but also to help us meet some real needs in the city, meet the immediate needs for employment, as well as to really move our city into the years ahead and to take care of some really critical projects. So I thank you. I think this is a very good initiative, and that's about all. I know that it will help employ many in our community who need those jobs, and we will all across the community benefit from the projects that come about as a result of it. So thank you again for your leadership.
Mayor,
Yes.
two thoughts that I've had since since this started. One, keying off of, the Mayor Pro Tem's comment about work outside and some of the important work to be done there. And also the importance of telework during the time of COVID-19. One amendment that Councilmember Alter incorporated in her most recent draft, and I appreciate it, was that we should have this certainly for people that are unemployed and need a job and need help because of the economic crisis. But then also as we develop a strategy for higher risk people who may not be able to get on unemployment, or eventually their unemployment runs out. If this creates jobs that are in more safe settings because you're not in a crowd or you're not indoors, you're not around a lot of people, that this could be a good vehicle for where some of those folks can go and continue working in a safer way. And so I think in that case, if we're doing some level of targeted hiring, it may be best for it to be a private actor that is hiring folks, so we can directly connect to those more those folks that we would rather be working outside rather than an indoor job. So I just want to sort of flag that out there, as if there is some component of linking those efforts. I think it could be useful. I don't think we have to add much more to the resolution. I think the manager hears that. But then to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, if, it made sense that the Civilian Conservation Corps in the FDR era, had certain goals, but also here in the COVID era, if there's also training and things we can be doing to get people to the place where they can do safer telework jobs, along with these jobs outdoors, that may be something for us to be thinking about. And again, not something I think we need to write in, but I just want to raise that idea. And then my third and last point here is if we wind up not using CARES Act money because we find a different way of allocating CARES Act, but we still move forward with something like this, there might be some benefit to it being some level of private actors, but we've had all these conversations about outsourcing and insourcing. And so there may be cases where it may be useful for us to actually have this work done in-house by PARD. I understand that if we use CARES Act money, that might be a little bit tricky because we don't want to be seen as supplanting, but I just want to raise those 3 points. One, as part of our strategy of having folks that we don't want in a crowded setting, maybe these are good jobs to have somebody in a less crowded setting. Two, apart from just training for outdoors work, there might be some ideas around training people for telework that might be safer in COVID. And then third, let's just think about how much of this to outsource versus insource based on the funding source. So I just want to raise those 3 points as y'all think about what to bring back. But thank you guys for everybody that has been working to make this right.
Thank you. Almost 5 o'clock. We ready to move on? We still have executive session. Councilmember Alter, you want to close?
Yeah, I do. I wanted to, first of all, thank my co-sponsors, Councilmember Poole, Tova Kassar, and Mayor Adler. I think this is a real opportunity with the Civilian Conservation Corps to think about how we make investments and choices that meet immediate needs, but also pay dividends down the line in terms of skill development and in terms of work product outputs that help our community. This focused on conservation projects, but if we can figure out the model, there are lots of other ways that we can move forward. And I don't want to get too deep into the potentials for the models. There are lots of permutations that really take advantage of ability of different organizations to identify workforce needs and pull down funding. And I think it sets us up to be able to get funding from other jurisdictions in various ways. But if we want to be a resilient city, we need to think about our investments, and certainly the immediate needs are important. But if we can come up with ways that meet multiple objectives, I think we will be stronger as a city. It requires us to be creative. It requires us to think outside of the box, and it requires us to do things a little bit differently than may feel immediately comfortable. But I think I learned so much with all the people that we worked with on this and the conversations. And the challenge here is that we cross so many departments and there's so many opportunities. But I'm really excited about moving it forward and being able to think forward. I do hope that we will fund portions of it from the CARES. There's an unlimited number of projects and there's an unlimited number of people who could be employed, but I wanted us to have a chance to see the larger spending plan framework before saying it should be X dollars. And I wanted us to get the program structure a little bit more nailed down in the interim. There is another piece of this resolution that I just want to highlight as well. Originally, we had wanted to talk about how in COVID we needed to pay attention to some of the environmental impacts. We have switched it, and the focus is really squarely on our telecommuting policies and providing direction to the city manager to look towards updating our telecommuting policies and our goals for our telecommuting in light of what we've learned from having to do the working from home. And I think we've learned a lot. And we need to be capturing that and maybe reassessing what our goals need to be moving forward. So I hope that we will have that. That also came up in mobility committee and was already in there. There are other ways that this program can be used. I just want to add in terms of other activities is work that's going on by some of these organizations that refurbishes computers and does some of the green infrastructure. So those are not off the table. We just picked out some of the projects that seem to make the most sense given what we learned through the journey. I think when we look to employment in an era with 25% unemployment, these kinds of jobs with training and skills are going to be very attractive. They also are jobs that have hope and have the option for some community and to see that you have value. And if we look back in history, you know, getting out of the recession, the Great Recession took a long time, and the programs that worked and had the biggest impact took into consideration not just the immediate needs, but also kind of the mental need for hope and inspiration and to be active and to be doing work that you cared about. So thank you everyone for your support.
Just so the record is clear, Councilmember Alter, did you want to say that we're working on a version that is not quite finished?
There are a few tiny grammatical things that were changed that will be in the version, like an apostrophe and a comma here or there, is my understanding of what's in the other version. Okay. And I'm moving the version that was distributed this morning via the clerk's office for any clarity.
Staff can make the Scrivener changes.
Thank you.
So those in favor of this item, please raise your hand. Those opposed, passes unanimously on the dais.